Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is your seat table. And over here off to my right is little Missy. She's behaving herself. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And we are looking at the second edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons sourcebook for the Complete Book of Dwarves. Interesting things was if you were back in the day, if you played back in the 70s, very early 80s, the original rules had dwarves and elves and halflings as an actual player character class. So you chose to be a warrior or a barbarian or a thief or a cleric or a dwarf or an elf or a halfling. And then, of course, things changed, and the book started to advance, and first edition rules came out, and people started advocating that the races should not be classes. That it's more that a dwarven cleric and a dwarven fighter, a dwarven thief and a dwarven wizard is just as palatable as any human version. And it also opened up, obviously, the opportunities for exploring the avenues of those combinations. And so they had to come back and they had to do some slight adjustments on the rules because originally, like I said, the dwarves and elves and halflings were a class and not a race, and thus you could advance them only so far, and it had a lot of the mechanics were adjusted and tweaked to take into that account because of their speciality. So, elves being all but immune to the elements, for example, and dwarves having a stone sense or direction sense underground, etc. And of course, being able to see in the dark for both of them, blah blah blah. Those were extra special. Those are extra considered special stuff. So if you have a human can't naturally see in the dark or naturally sense the type of stone that's around them. That's something they have to learn how to do, or they have to have magical adaptation. Somebody's got to give them the means to see in the dark. Whether it's a device or a some kind of spell that alters the physical makeup of the individual. So. This had to be translated into some kind of variations on the rules so they didn't overbalance the dwarven characters or the elvish characters. So they started producing when second edition came out a little bit more advanced books, and we've already seen the one I believe on the elves and the halflings. So, and this is no different. So we got is a whole slew of information on the dwarves, even more detailed background and possibility, some expanded clans and types. So you've got your typical hill dwarves, mountain, deep, Druger, Sundered, Gully, and yeah, so you got quite a few. This ability store and other characteristics, blah blah. So, role playing and personalities, right? So, let's see. We get into things like dwarves that you will know, dwarves that you don't know, the complete player handbook series on the rules for it, the creation of worlds, some bit history, dwarven afterlife, mountain dwarves, hill dwarves. So the explanations a little more detailed on them. And then we get into various, like your life as a dwarf, being a part of a clan, clans and guilds, new clans, clans in society. Loyalties, worldview, love of stability, dwarven crafts, dwarven humor, dwarven wealth, crafts, individualism, emotions, attitudes toward other races or to the death, isolationism, dwarven hearths, marriage, life cycle of the dwarves, apprenticeship, marriageable age, adult life, dwarf's diet, clothing, music and singing, creating dwarf characters, blah blah blah. So subrace distinctions. Each subrace, so deep dwarves and mountain dwarves and Druger each have some advantages for being what they are. They also have some negative advantages as well, or disadvantages. Sundered elves, gully elves. Yeah, you want to mess up campaign and run a pack of gully elves. Oof. Alright, especially you get players that actually have an idea what that really means and what it means to be a gully dwarf wolf. Right? So, various things, proficiencies in lore, non-weapon proficiencies, new skill sets, things like this. Composition of kits. So, we have warrior kits, the animal master, the axe for hire, the clan's dwarf, the hearth guard, the battle rager. I didn't think nothing much about this battle rager shit until I read about in the Drizzt Do'Urden saga. There is Pwent, I believe is his name. He's a dwarven battle rager that's part of Mithril Hall, and that dude is scripted straight out of this, the explanation of this, or this was scripted from him. I'm guessing it was this, that they scripted that sub character based off of what does it to mean to be a dwarven battle rager here. Straight up, these are not somebody you want to screw with. You cheese these people off. You just like it's like throwing frogs in a blender. You're just, oh my god, it's going to be horrific, and they don't stop. So if you throw the frog in the blender and don't and forget to keep your hand out of the blender, that blender's going to chop your fingers off and gleefully do so and not think twice about it. That's a battle rager for you in a nutshell, right? And I had one player who loved to play the damn things after he'd read the Drizzt Do'Urden books. He absolutely loved to play the stupid battle rager, and it would just be so frustrating for both being the game master and for some of my players, because the other guys is like, this guy's a loon. We would not normally do that. That's the nature of the battle rager. I give the guy's credit. He was true to the character and its archetype. So the outclass, the rapid response rider, sharpshooter, priest kits, craft priest, the pharaoh, or the pharaoh, priest who's left his stronghold, patrician, ritual priest, and then we got warrior priest kits, the champion, temple guard, the vindicator, thief kits, the diplomat, the entertainer, the locksmith, the pest controller, warrior kits, the ghetto fighter, warrior thief kits, right? The trader, the vermin slayer, the wayfinder, dwarven personality, basic personalities, dwarven personalities, the decadent, the glory seeker, the grumbler. The grumbler loves being unhappy. Nothing satisfies him. It's either too damp or too dark or too smelly or too cold or too hot or simply wrong. There is never a right. He may grudgingly admit things are not too bad, but they're bad enough. He's only happy when he has something to be unhappy about. And he is not always vocal about his unhappiness. So, a few well-placed moans may be the best protest, as long as everyone knows that he is not happy. Best suited for most kits except diplomat will work. To give him something to do grumble about, see the negative side of the kit, right? So, something. The grumbler. Hell, I think I fit that category half the time in my life. The hoarder, the optimist, the paragon, the phobic, the pragmatist, the statesman. You want a phobic. I think I really stepped out of my comfort zone for a minute to run a dwarf character who was a bit schizophrenic and all nuts, very special needs in a lot of ways, and he was also he had many phobias. One of his phobias was he was terrified of short people, despite the fact he himself was short. He abhorred the use of sharp weapons, so he only would use blunt weapons. And in some cases, he was loath to use the blunt weapons because they would potentially cut stuff. And it was hard to keep that character in character, but I managed to pull it off, and it was definitely a challenge. And I highly recommend that to any player who's spent any time, you got any kind of experience under your belt. Occasionally try to experiment with a character that is so not you, that is so different. Perhaps it will give you an insight or a window into a piece of your psyche you've been ignoring, or that you know is there and needs a little outlet. I'm just saying. Now that mindset and attitude has led me to have a couple campaigns with players who were all on board with it, that led us down some pretty dark paths. And you can have some really dark campaigns, some really dark settings, and very dark players if all the players are on board with it, and we have a very clearly defined border line that we're not crossing. So the pragmatist, the statesman, mining, conducting a survey, gemstones, metals, types of mines, shoring a tunnel, playing out a mine, smelters, new weapons, the Orc Masher, designing dwarven strongholds. Yeah, I've used this section more than a few times because it really helped me to quickly fill out a dwarven citadel or outpost or something like that, and to give me a little bit of variety in there without having to go out of my way to create a whole lot of extra uh, material that's only going to generally be seen by me. Now, that's one of the downsides of being a game master, is if you're world building and you're creating, there's a lot of times you will create a lot of stuff and for your world that never really gets brought up at the table, and if somebody asks an out of character question about, well, how does this work, or why is it this way, well, if here's, let me grab folder number 2, and we'll pull out my notebook and say, well, this is what I have on this, and this is why, there was this grand war through 300 years ago, and between this nation and that nation, and these people and that people, and this is why there's still a lot of enmity between the two peoples, etc. today. And what has that got to do with this? Well, you said you came from that village over there, and these people are on this village over here, and you're on the other side of the line. There's a reason why they're being assholes to you, and part it's because of your shared history. So war is our life, militias, special forces, blah blah. The importance of myth, choice of subraces. So designing dwarven campaigns. Dwarven campaigns can be an interesting, different endeavor from what you're traditionally used to when you have a mixed variety of classes and races. So when you have, and I know this because, like I said, I did a video way back, and if I can find it, I'll put a clip at the end of the video to share what. But I did 2 dwarves in a wagon. So basically, the whole campaign was based around dwarven characters and dwarven NPCs and dwarven villains that were problems, and of course a scattering of random monsters and set pieces that complemented the campaign. The whole point, though, was I built them around these 2 dwarven teamsters driving a delivery wagon between various outposts in the main fortress, and having a regular route meant they actually made this circuit several times. So when they would come back around and an event had taken place the previous time, well, bandits, there's that old bridge where the bandits got us. So we keep it checking. We get to the bridge and there's no bandits there. When you see a couple well-weathered bits and pieces of the former bandits still laying there off to the side that nothing's bothered to claim, or I think the third time they came around, they ran into they camped on the other side of the bridge in a flowery field, and it turned out that the field was full of petals. I think the little fairy things are called, and that led to a non-aggressive, because you can have some really good adventures or really good encounters that don't involve bloodshed. I mean, if you really want to go down that route. So anyhow, this was a good book, and there's been many modern renditions of it, and pretty much every player manual, every player handbook for Dungeons and Dragons has their version of this in it. This is just a bit more extensive, and it gave us a wider range of character classes and opportunities to play as a dwarf, and it helped flesh out dwarven communities and culture in general, because it's one thing to say, well, everybody's a dwarf. Well, yeah, but then within the dwarven society and community, certain people are there's different jobs and different tasks, and people are suited, and some dwarves are better suited to certain things than others. Some, I don't want to work in the mines. I hate working in the mines. I like working in the craft hall. Let me work in the craft hall. Or somebody who's at the smelter all day is like, I'd rather be down in the mines. This sucks. The freedom of going around and the satisfaction of chasing a new vein, etc., etc. So it's just a matter of perspective. Anyway, until next time, I'm Rick. This is over there. Y'all have a great weekend.